Today, the Art of Culinary Spaces takes us to Adobe's Founders Tower, an exemplary model of sustainability and innovative design. This all-electric building stands out not only for its commitment to using 100% renewable energy, but also for its unique, adaptable interior design approach. Food Space tailored a creative and flexible culinary solution to meet the unique demands while enhancing both functionality and the overall experience for its occupants. Please welcome FCSI members Joe Schumaker and Renee Palmer as they break down this exceptional workspace. Joe, Renee, thank you for joining us this week. Before we really get started, though, tell us a little bit about your firm.
Yeah, hey Wade. Hey Renee, good to see you. So we are Food Space. We started the company in 2015 in Northern California and have since expanded to Idaho. And Renee is actually sitting in Huntsville, Alabama.
And of course, this week we're talking about Founders Tower at the Adobe headquarters. Tell us a little bit about how this project came about for Food Space.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We started the company in 2015, as I mentioned, and in late 2017, we got approached to participate in a really early programming session with Adobe. It was actually direct with Adobe and their food operator, who's Bon Appetit. And we actually sat in some early charrettes talking about their global food program and what some of their goals were. And next thing we knew, this Founders Tower project was in the hopper. We went through their full RFP process, and the rest is history. We won the project, and have built a really strong relationship with them and Bon Appetit. It's been a great 5+ years now.
Well, that leads me right into my next question, Joe. And is that what was from the time you began? What was the project's timeline, and was there a budget plan at the beginning that maybe had to change?
It's a great question. So the project plan originally, building a brand new 18-story tower in downtown San Jose, and the thought process is that this was an expansion of their campus. And so what was very unique about this project is it was a parking lot when we started. It was a flat parking lot in downtown San Jose, California, and the existing three towers that have been around forever. This is Adobe's world headquarters. They wanted to have a real connection with their existing buildings. And so from day one, they knew they were building a tower that was going to be the same height and sizes and scope of the existing towers. And they knew that it wanted to connect on an overhead connection bridge with the existing spaces. So from day one, the timeline and schedule had to do with building the tower, doing the full improvement, permitting all the way along. And then there was this conversation about electrification. And so it really sort of progressed early in the design phase. So yeah, it was definitely a long project. We knew it was going to be very long, 4 to 5 years, and there were a lot of moving parts.
Is there an overview you can give us of Founders Tower itself and what makes it unique within Adobe's corporate headquarters that were already, like you said, a couple of the towers are already there. What makes this one a little bit more unique potentially?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of things. Obviously, the all electric is the biggest one, right? It's one of the largest all electric buildings in California, and from a food service perspective, it's the largest all electric kitchens in North America as it was opening. I think as far as within Adobe, there's a couple of things that are very unique. One is they've continued to change sort of their seating styles. As most companies have gone through sort of this transition from private office to open workspace to collaboration spaces, Adobe really did a lot of studies to try and figure out what the right workplace environment was going to be. I think the other big thing with this tower is the parking, right? So a lot of people don't realize, but the bottom 6 floors of this building is actually all parking. So making sure that they had enough parking and also connection to mass transit were all very huge components of this tower. And then lastly, they wanted to look from a food service perspective. They wanted to make sure that we're doing both things. We were sort of paying homage to their existing food program, but then also creating some new spaces that they've never had before, some new cuisine types, some new authenticity that they didn't have the capability of producing now. And then lastly is bringing in-house bakery, soup and stock production, salad salad, dressing, sauces, things like that, meat cutting, those types of things. Bringing that all in house in a large production kitchen was another sort of component of this project. So all of those things made this tower very unique to the existing spaces.
Wow. So that's a lot of food service operations, a lot of different types you said, from bakeries to butchers to every, cuisines and stuff. So obviously you mentioned 100% electric and also renewable energy. So within that, I mean, what were some of the biggest challenges, and then also what turned into big triumphs, if you will, or wins for you, designing this when you had to be all electric all of a sudden? And well, not all of a sudden, but you just had to be all electric and using a renewable energy. What were some of the things that were really big challenges that you had to overcome, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost was the scale and the size. So, I mean, just to put this in perspective, average corporate dining, workplace dining is probably 10 to 15, maybe upwards of 20,000 square feet total, including seating. In this case, we were looking at almost 50,000 square feet of kitchens throughout the entirety of the building. So we knew that pretty early on. Um, we actually designed this project both ways. We designed it all electric, and we also designed it actually three ways. We designed it all electric, we designed it hybrid, meaning a combination of gas with an emphasis on electric, and then we also designed it sort of more traditional with a lot more gas equipment. And then the studies began on the cost, both first and second costs for going all electric. One thing that I think is really important for folks to understand is that this is in a moment in time in 2018 where Google was making a large push to build a very large facility adjacent to the Adobe towers, and Google was going to build all electric as well. So there was actually a joint public private partnership between the city of San Jose, Google, and Adobe that was going to actually build an all electric or a hydroelectric plant in the river that goes between the two facilities. Unfortunately, a lot of Adobe's decision was actually influenced by the ability to go to fully renewable energy by 2030. So, in that moment, those decisions were obviously way above our pay grade, but the conversation leading up to that required a lot of effort on our part to figure out how much power we were going to need. One more piece of framework: this project is over 650 kilowatts just for the kitchens alone. So we're talking about five separate substations with transformer
Wow.
gear just to provide the electricity necessary for the kitchens alone. That's without HVAC equipment. That's without other general power going to the building. So they knew food service was a huge draw and a
Wow.
huge use of the electricity in the building.
Yeah. Um, and then, so then build upon that. What were some of the pieces maybe that you had to find new equipment for, or and then and how did you find some of that equipment? How did what research did you do? Where'd you come from? And then what were some of the pieces that maybe either surprised you, or you were just thrilled that you found them and able to work with them?
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces that I think really stand out from that perspective. And the first one I'm going to start with is actually the hearth. And realistically, Adobe went into this project saying one of the things that we're missing in our other towers is a true hearth style oven. And making the switch to not being able to do any sort of fossil fuel at all, or any sort of wood burning fuel or coal, those things automatically sort of make it challenging to do a more traditional showpiece type hearth oven. So um, we actually went out to host in 2019. We actually went to the Rationale factory first with Adobe. They joined us. We got introduced to the Iveria, the new piece of equipment coming out from Rationale, which, by the way, in the U.S. was not available yet. And then we were also out at host looking for a hearth oven, an electric hearth oven, which we found. And as you may know, getting some of this equipment into the US, getting it certified and getting it able to have service out here is very, very challenging. Luckily, we found a company that was already bringing the equipment here to the US. And so we partnered with them to do the hearth oven. And I think it actually came out really, really nice. One interesting thing, I actually learned that new pizzerias in Italy are actually mostly electric. In fact, about 70% of the new pizzerias that are opening in Italy post 2015 or so are actually using
Hmm.
electric hearth ovens because the electric elements actually heat the stone more consistently and better, and therefore the crust on the bottom actually comes out better than in a gas powered or a wood fired
Makes
oven.
sense.
So Yeah, I learned a lot during that process.
You talked a lot about the cuisines and other things that were available to the Adobe employees. What are some of the things that are available to them that are based in Founders? What are some of the cuisines you had to consider? You talked about open hearth cooking, but what are some of the actual foods that they were going to be cooking that you had to consider how now to cook with only electric?
Yeah, I'm going to actually focus on one very important one, which is we made a very early decision within the entire project to not try and fake anything. And when I say fake anything, I'm going to use grill marks as an example. So when I put, hash mark grill marks on a chicken breast, I'm doing that because I'm using a type of cooking, right? A specific type of a charbroiler. Um, in all electric, we don't have that. So we would be faking grill marks if we were to put grill marks on a piece of chicken. So we made an early decision not to do that. And so because of that, what we had to do is look at not only the menus that they wanted to produce, we had to come up with alternate methods. Well, one of those methods is actually cast iron searing. And guess what? Cast iron is one of the best
Hmm,
conductors of induction technology. So what we did was we actually looked at induction, we looked at flat top griddles that were capable of putting very high heat sears on things with all electric. We looked at charbroilers and cheap or salamanders and cheese melters that are capable of high heat that could mimic that caramelization without faking the grill marks. And I think that was a really early
hmm,
decision that we made. So just to give you a sense, the first floor production kitchen is about 10,000 square feet. That is pure behind the scenes production. And then that is what is divvying the food out to the rest of the facility.
okay.
The seventh floor is a seven concept food hall, ranging cuisines all the way from a noodle bowl,
Oh wow.
sushi, poke concept, all the way through to traditional North and South Indian, including dosas. So they're actually making handmade dosas right there in the Indian station.
Hmm,
A Mexican station, and all of the food hall stations were actually named. So the food hall has a master name called Render, which of course is an Adobe, tool. And then each of the stations were given names based on the Adobe concepts. So it was really the food hall itself was a very cool thing. And then one other area that I want to talk about was this restaurant that we built on the eighth floor. This is a very unique restaurant. We actually did quite a bit of research about this restaurant. So this restaurant is actually a sit down dining restaurant that is family style. And the way it works is, let's say, Wade and Renee and I wanted to go to lunch, and there's three of us, but the tables are all six tops. So we would get partnered with three other random people. We would sit down for a meal, and plates of food would just start coming out in a family style environment. So this restaurant is called Gather. And the whole goal here was to really create a sense of community and a sense of sort of these casual collisions, right? Where employees that may have never talked to each other are going to sit down and have a meal together. So there's some really, really cool concepts and hidden gems throughout the building that an outsider would never even know existed, that we were very participatory with Adobe, with the rest of the design team, Gensler, who was our architect, really working through what some of these concepts would be and how they would work.
Nice. Now I know that reading through it in the project showcase issue, it talks a lot about flexibility is really important to Adobe, not only for today but for the next 3 to 5 years. So, when you design this and then finding the equipment that were going to work, tell us a little bit about how flexibility worked for you and how did you design it to be able to adapt to future needs.
Yeah, the interesting thing, and this is sort of a food space thing anyway. And from our perspective, we want to think about the future always, right? We're not trying to build a 3 to 5 year kitchen. We're trying to build a 20-year kitchen or more. One of the best ways to do that is to really start with the way we exhaust, right? So our hood systems, we used utility cabinet systems with very flexible, reconfigurable power panels, where you can rerun new power to anywhere you need, full coverage Ansel systems, and then oversizing and
Hmm,
right sizing the hoods and the exhaust systems so that if they were to ever add in a new piece of equipment that was of a high value or high velocity, they have the capability of doing that. So that's where we started. Where we continued on that was actually in some of the stations. So some of the stations don't have any Type 1 exhaust in them at all. So we're using ventless equipment in a few of the stations. And so
Hmm.
being able to swap in and out some of that equipment in the future is very, very important. And then lastly, I think it has to do with even the prep areas. We did very few fixed or permanently mounted shelving or tables. It's all on casters, it's all reconfigurable, giving them sort of the flexibility in the future, drop down power from the ceiling. In fact, this is one of the first projects that we used
Nice.
bus track on in the ceiling, where you can actually reconfigure the power from the ceiling with new drop down cords so that you can handle blenders or mixers or other things in the future, all the way up to 480 volts coming down from the ceiling with a twist lock system. So, a lot of really
Hmm.
unique, flexible things that'll just give them the ability to think differently in the future without having to do a major remodel on these kitchens.
What do you hope companies like other food service designers or architects can learn from the creation of this Founders Tower that you've done?
Um, I think programming is a short-changed art and a short-changed phase in a lot of projects. And I've said this for a long time. Food service consultants are brought in too late to projects a lot of times. This project is the poster child for how collaboration is supposed to work. All of the teams started very early talking about these concepts, experimenting. We went out to eat dozens and dozens of times together in different restaurants to explore different concepts. Um, that's very, very rare. And I think a lot of projects would really find some new and different, exciting successes by taking that time to prepare. The preparation for this project far
Yeah.
exceeded any other project I've ever worked on in my career.
Well, and to add to that, the preparation also helped us realign ourselves after taking a year-long break because of COVID, right? So all of that programming that we did up front, we had to essentially kind of revisit that, make sure that we were still designing to that, because, the world changed after COVID. And ultimately, our programming was so well executed and thorough, that, again, designing for the future still applied to the programming we did pre-COVID.
And I guess the last question, and for both of you on this, is what was the most enjoyable aspect of working on this project? I know it was a long time together, so what was the most enjoyable part of it?
Walking the space, walking the space afterwards, right? I mean, this was a multi-year project, lot of effort, lot of time. I mean, it's always so rewarding to be able to walk this space and stand back and say, wow. I will say, like, a lot of the collaboration between Gensler and us, the overall design and aesthetic, how the equipment fits in with, just the aesthetic side of it. I think that was really successful. It really created individual spaces, really authentic spaces, something that you could walk in and feel like, really immersed in the food that's being produced
Yeah.
within each station, within each floor. Even the production kitchen, although it is the workhorse and the behind the scenes, it is still open to the public, in which people can walk by on that ground floor and see within. So it's not necessarily open to the
Hmm.
public in which people can go in, but it's visible from
Yeah.
the sidewalk. And so there was even a lot of thought into, how does this look from a passerby perspective? So I will say the design and the integration with the equipment was really well thought out.
I so realized that when we started this project, we were a two-person company. It was Renee and I. Marcy was just starting to join the company. We were in a bit of a growth mode, although we had only done a few projects. We had only finished a few projects. Renee was a or project coordinator at the time, right? I think for both of us, we both grew tremendously, not only because of this project, but also just because of what we made ourselves figure out how to do. We this was a learning project for us, big time. a little bit of a coup that we got it in the beginning as a small startup firm, right? So really, we grew a lot. And I would say that both of us are far better in our careers and in our path and building food space. Renee's a partner now. And like, that part of it. So that's maybe the corny, cheesy part. I think the other, well, maybe it's, you get my point. I think the other one, our ability to really see the future without a lot of history to go on. We took a lot of risks that paid off, but every single one of those risks, we made sure behind the scenes we were giving the right advice. We were a true consultant to this project. And I would say that some projects that aren't as collaborative as this one, this project was so collaborative, it allowed us that flexibility to bring our input and our ideas. And even in the face of COVID, we were able to sort of make it through all of that and then still deliver something pretty remarkable. This is a legacy project. No matter who would have done it, this is a legacy project, and we got to be part of it. And I think that's something that will stick with me for the rest of my career, for the rest of my life. And lastly, I mean, the support of not only the internal teams, meaning Gensler and Bon Appetit and Adobe themselves, but also the support of the FCSI community, the manufacturers. Like, everybody rallied around this project from the beginning. You don't see that all the time. Sometimes we're all just head down doing the rat race, right? This project was truly a collaboration, and I think that's actually pretty rare in this world. So those are all the things that I think just really make this a one-of-a-kind, very, very unique project.
Very nice. The last question for you, which is a very easy one, is tell us a little bit about how people can find out more information about Food Space and you guys.
You can reach out to us via emails. Our emails are on the website, myfoodspace.com. You can also connect with us through LinkedIn.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of The Art of Culinary Spaces. We hope this conversation has sparked your creativity and inspired new ideas within the world of food service design and planning. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of our future podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode when we explore another groundbreaking project and exceptional design from FCSI members that are transforming the culinary landscape.